In 2025, you can get a pro sounding mix by using just stock and free plugins. Let me show you the difference.
See my dark side, baby. Running out of time now today. See my dark side, baby. Running out of time now today.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Make the Music, and in today's video I'm showing you how you can get a pro level mix using just stock and free plugins that you can find in Reaper and online. Getting a pro mix has never been easier in this world of digital recording, so I'm gonna walk you through how I use stock plugins to get a great sounding mix that you could release, and you'll definitely fool people into thinking that you used a bunch of high cost, high quality tools. I have some free guides in the description box down below, including a bunch of free plugins, resources, sample packs to help you start creating music in your home studio for free. Go ahead and check those out. I also, if you're using Reaper, I have a Reaper mix template that you can get for free in the description box down below. So go ahead and check those out. Anyways, let me launch into this mix and show you how I use just free and stock plugins to get a really great sound. Okay, so I'm in my Reaper session here. You can see there's quite a few tracks for this song. I got a bunch of drums, there's guitars, there's bass, there's piano. It wasn't like there was a simple track that I used stock plugins on, okay? I needed to really dig down deep and figure out which free plugins I wanted to use on which tracks. So let's go to the mixing tab here and let's talk about our mix bus. Typically, I use a bunch of fancy paid plugins on my mix bus, so it was fun to go back to using some stock stuff here. I'm using the Reaper stock EQ on the master track or mix bus. This affects all the tracks in the mix. And I use these EQ bands to add a lot of low mid information there. I then use the Reaper stock saturation, which seems to be at 0% to add some, interesting taste to the track, but it was at 0%. This is the Reaper stereo width. I added 1.7 dB of width boost to give the track an added feel and dynamic. And then I have the stock Reaper compressor, which is doing about 3-ish dB of gain reduction when we get to the final chorus. I have the ratio set at 2:1, a slow attack and a fast release. Let me show you what kind of gain reduction is going on here. So you can see somewhere between 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction using the stock Reaper compressor on the master bus. It glues the whole track together. So if I took the master bus off, you will get this sound. The one without the master bus processing sounded louder because I wasn't compressing it, it was clipping, but now I'm compressing it and getting it to sound all good and glued together. I can add that volume back in the mastering stage. Let's get to the drums track here. So let me solo that real quick. On the entire drum bus, I'm using a stock EQ plugin, adding some low end and some top end to the entire drum track, a bit of compression to reel them all in. This is a really great trick on drums, not to overdo compression, but just a couple of dB to blend and glue all the different aspects of the kit together. This is one of those tracks where I have some big like kick samples, stomps, and then like an actual drum kit playing. And since these are very different sources, using a compressor on the drum bus can help me bring them all together. I'm using the Valhalla Supermassive. This is a free reverb plugin that you can get, something that would be in my home studio toolbox, and it helps improve the ambience and add a big feel to my drum tracks. So you can see those three plugins really made a big difference. I'm using a stock EQ and compressor on my kick here. Just about 1 dB of gain reduction. Same thing with my Dragon Stomp track here as well. Just looks like some saturation on that one. On the entire drum kit, I took out a lot of mid-range information that didn't need to be there, and the other parts of the kit will take up. Really, we just wanted that hi-hat sound to really be kind of prevalent. For the clap, there was a really weird ringing frequency that I took out around 2.3K. You see I have a big thundering tom here. I took out a little low end, added some mid-range. So So you can see with the stock EQ, it's all about really small moves that add up to something big, a big result over time, and you get something that sounds like this. So you can see darker, not as punchy, added the EQ and compressor plugins, and it does the job. Next, we move on to the bass. I have a bass guitar and some bass synths here. You can hear them right here. I want to contain the low end while still making it feel big and majestic in this track. So I rolled off some top and rolled off some top end here and some low end with the high pass filter. Added some Reaper stock saturation and a limiter to bring and glue all the low end elements together. For the bass guitar, I have a stock EQ and compressor. Add a lot of top end to bring out the stringiness of the bass guitar. And a little bit of compression just to reel it in. I have some bass synths here that didn't require any processing. So it's subtle differences. Mixing is not necessarily about making these big sweeping differences, but making accumulative small differences across the tracks to help glue them together. Let's talk about the acoustic guitars. I'm gonna mute the vocal real quick once we go through the other tracks. Acoustic guitars are some of the most difficult tracks to mix in the home studio because we don't have sufficient recording environments sometimes, and there can be a lot of low end buildup. You gotta make sure the strings are fresh. So I added some saturation here of 53% to the acoustic guitars. Let me take the plugins off actually. So you can see really dark sounding, not great. So I added the saturation in. I added something called the tilt equalizer, which comes in Reaper. And what allows you to do is tilt the entire brightness or darkness of a track, depending on if you need to be brighter or darker. So I tilted it higher to make the whole thing brighter. And it kind of worked like a fresh air plugin that Slate has, but in a free way. I use a stock EQ to take out some low end, some low mid information, add some top end. And then the LA plugin. This is a free limiter LA2A style plugin that does an amazing job at compressing acoustic guitars. I highly recommend you pick up this plugin if possible. That way the guitars can consistently sit on the edges of the track, and it sounds like this. Dark, not present to very upfront in the track. Let me play the comparison again. Very, very nice. If we get to the electric guitars here, you can see I have 4 tracks going on. Reaper stock saturation, a little bit of EQ, just adding some mid-range, taking out the top end and the low end. Valhalla Supermassive, adding some reverb and ambience to all the tracks, and a little bit of stock Reaper delay on the slapback setting as well. Adding some beef and ambience to the guitars. Pianos, just EQ. Basically a smiley face EQ, adding some top and low end. You know, these sounded really good when I got to the mixing stage and didn't feel like I needed to do a lot with them. The strings, 39% saturation there to add some, analog feel. EQ, getting rid of low and low mids, adding some brightness in the top end, and the Valhalla Supermassive Reverb, a free plugin that adds some nice ambience. So you can see they're kind of dark and muffled without the EQ, but I add the EQ in, they sound really good. Same thing with the pads as well, just some EQ. Taking out the lows there. Didn't need any processing on the choirs. Just a little bit of EQ. And no processing on the FX. Let's get to the vocals. Mixing vocals can be difficult no matter what plugins you're using, so it was kind of a challenge with the stock ones. But here's what I've got going on here for all the vocals. If I take them off, it's really going to sound bad.
Gotta see my dark side, baby.
There's a lot of backups that I need to compress together and make work. So what I've got going on here is a Reaper stock EQ, taking out low end, adding some lower mid range, or getting rid of some low mids and adding some top end to make them brighter.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
Stock Reaper compressor.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
When all the vocals come in, it adds about 11 to 12 dB of gain reduction. I have it on the modern vocal preset. I use the limiter here. I'm a big fan of using limiters on vocals. I use the stock real limit to kind of bring out and balance all the vocal levels.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
When you're doing that much compressing and limiting, you're going to need a de-esser to get rid of the harsh sibilant sounds.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
If you want a video on how to mix vocals in Reaper using just stock plugins, go ahead and check out that video up there in the corner. And I go over that in depth in Reaper. Stock delay with a little slapback.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
So definitely too dry without that one and the reverb, the Valhalla Supermassive.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
And then I just have stock compressors going on both the lead vocals for the verse and chorus part to add some extra compression.
Gonna see my dark side, baby.
Also note that there was some automation done to the vocal. Don't forget about your automation, another free tool you have in your DAW. And I lowered the vocal at some parts in the verse and brought it up in the final chorus to get it to fit with everything. So the final mix sounds like this.
Gonna see my dark side, baby. Running out of time now today.
So often for convenience, I will use paid plugins, but you can get a great sounding mix and master and recording using just stock plugins in your DAW. Hopefully that was a good lesson through that. Like I said, if you want great free resources, go to the description box down below. If you want some specific help with your home studio and getting the most out of it and getting great recordings, go ahead and let's set up a strategic coaching session down below and let's see if we can get the best out of your recordings. Thank you so much for watching. And anyways, I'll see you guys next time.